Travis Wayne Goodsell versus Corporation of the President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, 219 CV 00711 CW. In researching property manager versus landlord, the plaintiff has come across additional criminal violations of co-conspirators Danville Development and Valley Behavioral Health that are relevant to the case. Attached are the documents and evidences. The plaintiff assumes the expectation that his MARs are to be sealed so as not to be made public, despite there being damning evidence against the defendant and Dr. Cohn, along with others such as Dr. Golding. The plaintiff also understands that his MARs are evidence and therefore are not prohibited from presentation in accordance with federal law. Valley Behavioral Health are claiming to be landlords over the plaintiff and his residence, whereas Danville are claiming property management. Danville's website contradicts this claim. Post the website. Case management and placement for these properties are handled through Valley Behavioral Health, quote unquote. Means that Valley Behavioral Health are the property managers as Danville are the owners. The submitted expired business license, which was attached, is through Optum and not Valley Behavioral Health, who are only licensed to provide social worker care to their clients, which Valley Behavioral Health, MAR, shows the second discharge remove the plaintiff from being a client and that his residence is independent living. From the website snapshot of Danville, after Valley Behavioral Health's second official discharge, Danville is publicly claiming that the plaintiff, as a resident of this residence, is assisted living. Both Danville and Valley Behavioral Health claim to follow the Fair Housing Act, which the state's version is also provided, and provide the federal government website link, as the state's version was filed in a PDF form. The plaintiff has already addressed in previous emails the Utah law against retaliation of the accused by an accuser during a complaint by the accuser involving the accused, as the plaintiff has demonstrated crimes of hate and discrimination on behalf of the defendant and co-conspirators. Towards the plaintiff. The plaintiff also points out the federal fraud being perpetuated by both Danville and Valley Behavioral Health as to their titles and financial funding. The plaintiff has been informed that his monthly rent payments go to Danville, who is subsidized by HUD and not Valley Behavioral Health, who instead are paid through Optum through government grants. And if Valley Behavioral Health is indeed the actual landlord, they are in violation of the Fair Housing Act, for which they claim compliance to, as they discriminate against persons of disability who are not their clients, such as the plaintiff. The plaintiff notes that his disability status was court-ordered and not assigned by the plaintiff, not self-assigned. Self-assigned by the plaintiff, such that the plaintiff is not responsible for any and all medical and federal benefits fraud being committed by the defendant and their co-conspirators instead. Notice the state hospital's discharge of the plaintiff, quoting from Dr. Cohn, who manufactured a history of mental disability, as she clearly was not in the plaintiff's life prior to her appointment by the state judge. The competency legal court process was abused by the defendant and their co-conspirators to manufacture mental illness and a diagnosis which has an infamous history, being abused by the Nazis in World War II against Jews to perform human experimentations, and also by the Russians in the 1960s to remove from society and disappear, quote unquote, undesirable critics and political opponents. President John F. Kennedy's Americans for Disabilities Act was to ensure such horrific tactics would cease in the United States. However, Utah merely changed the name of the Utah Asylum to the Utah State Hospital. Psychology is well known among the hard sciences as a pseudoscience, a fake science, as so-called doctors and therapists do not perform any standardized scientific measurements to identify cause, as psychiatrists therefore are legally licensed drug dealers administering psychotropic drugs to clients for behavioral control symptom management, with no intention of curing, as they do not bother to look for a cause. All diagnoses, therefore, are opinion and speculation, and have no basis in evidence or fact. Yet government courts grant expert government law and courts grant expert witness legality and doctor-client confidentiality rights to cover up potential criminal activity against vulnerable child and adult clients, and in co-conspiracy with pharmaceutical companies. As Your Honor can witness, the plaintiff will keep exposing corruption and crimes beyond with what applies to victimization of the plaintiff. Your Honor must give a final judgment with prejudice immediately and order bench warrant arrests of all individuals for criminal prosecution before more lives are victimized. And then various files and documents and evidence were submitted in the attachments.